Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. This webinar is being presented by Clean Energy Group, and the topic of today's webinar is the high cost of AI, how data centers are reshaping Pennsylvania's energy landscape. The date today is February 25th, 2026, and we have an excellent panel of guest speakers with us today. But before I pass it over to them, I'd like to go over a few webinar logistics. All attendees are in listen-only mode, so your webcam and your microphone are disabled. The chat function is also disabled, so if you would like to submit questions and comments, you can do so via the Q&A panel. We'll be saving about 15 to 20 minutes at the end of the webinar to address audience questions. So as the webinar is progressing, feel free to submit your questions as you think of them, and then we'll get to them at the end. Automated captions are also available. Speakers' bios will be made available in the chat as they're being introduced. And finally, this webinar is being recorded. We will email you a webinar recording within 48 hours, and it will also be posted on CEG's website at cleanegroup.org/webinars. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to our first speaker today, my colleague Ava Morgan.
So Clean Energy Group we are a national nonprofit working to accelerate a just transition off of fossil fuels. We focus on climate resilience and community health, distributed energy access and equity, energy storage and flexible demand, and fossil fuel replacement. Next slide, please. This webinar is being presented under our Phase Out Peakers initiative. We work to replace peaker power plants with clean alternatives in environmental justice communities, partnering with community-based organizations. We work in a variety of different states, including New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Next slide, please. This webinar will be going over a recent report of ours called The High Cost of AI. This was written by Clean Energy Group alongside of Clean Air Council and Physicians for Social Responsibility in Pennsylvania. We recommend that you check it out. It's available at cleanegroup.org/PA data centers. Our webinar speakers today will be myself. I'm a project manager here at Clean Energy Group. I am joined by Jay Walker, a community organizer at Clean Air Council, and Josephine Gingrich, a health advocacy outreach coordinator for Physicians for Social Responsibility, Pennsylvania. Next slide, please. Thank you so much, and I will start off this webinar. Serena, are you able to share the slides?
Yes, sorry, 1 second.
No worries. Wonderful. Yeah. So as I mentioned, this webinar will be regarding the report that we put out this month called The High Cost of AI, How Data Centers Are Reshaping Pennsylvania's Energy Landscape. And as a reminder, you can visit cleanegroup.org/PA data centers to read the report in its entirety. Next slide, please. I'm going to provide a brief overview on data centers just so we all are starting with the same information. They are facilities that host computer servers, networking hardware, and cooling systems. They have been around for a while to support cloud computing efforts, but due to the proliferation of artificial intelligence, proposals for data centers have been exponentially increasing, and the energy that data centers use has been increasing as well. The energy that they use depends on the scale of them, and now we're seeing a vast amount of hyperscale data center proposals. So the capacity for these data centers, they can use as much electricity as entire cities. They're getting into the gigawatt range of electricity use. And then in addition to the energy demand that hyperscale data centers require, they also require a lot of water to cool their servers. It is a consumptive water use, so that water is evaporated as it is cooling. And as I mentioned, this development of data centers and the amount of proposals across the US has been exponentially rising due to the proliferation of artificial intelligence. Next slide, please. And so this is a really great map that Frac Tracker Alliance has put together on data center proposals in the US. As you can see through the legend, the red is operating data centers, the orange is approved, permitted, or under construction. And then, as you can see, there are a ton of yellow dots all across the US, and that is proposed data centers. And the size of the dot corresponds with the capacity needed for the data center, the amount of electricity and energy demand that they're going to require. I'd really recommend you checking out this map. It is quite informative on the amount of data center proposals in specific areas. Next slide, please. So as you can see, they're sort of clustered a lot in this East Coast region. And the reason that we're focusing on Pennsylvania so much is because Pennsylvania is part of the electricity grid in this region. Next slide, please. So we'll talk a little bit about PJM interconnection. So as you can see from the top photo, the US is split into regional electricity grids. PJM stands for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland, which were the three original states. But it is the regional electricity grid that serves 13 states, parts of 13 states and DC. And it is the largest regional electricity market by the amount of people that it serves. And so within this regional electricity market, various states export and import electricity. And one of the reasons that we focus so heavily on Pennsylvania in this report is that Pennsylvania is the biggest exporter of electricity in PJM, and it exports electricity to the states surrounding it. Next slide, please. So as you can see, as I mentioned, Pennsylvania down at the bottom, the states in orange are the net recipients of electricity. So they import electricity into the state to cover their energy needs. And then the states in blue are exporters of electricity. So this is a graph from 2024, data from 2024, and it shows just how much electricity Pennsylvania is exporting to the states around it. Pennsylvania is the second largest exporter of energy in the country, second to Texas. And this is really important because when we look at the clustering of data centers in the PJM region, Pennsylvania is going to be supplying energy not only to the hyperscale data centers that are proposed within Pennsylvania, but also to the data centers that are proposed in the region, in the other states in the region. And Virginia is one of the biggest markets for data center proposals. It currently hosts 35% of the world's hyperscale data centers, and that is only increasing. There's a specific area called Data Center Alley because there are so many data centers clustered there, and because Virginia imports a lot of its electricity from surrounding states and from Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania will be supplying a lot of that energy for data centers in the surrounding states. Next slide, please. So with that context, I just wanted to show this slide again and see, the vast amounts of data centers in the PJM region and how much Pennsylvania is going to be relied on to provide that energy to the data centers in the surrounding states. Next slide, please. So both Pennsylvania and PJM, as we've seen in the past few years, have been really doubling down on using fossil fuels to meet this projected energy demand from data center proposals. They're doing it in a variety of different ways, which we will cover. Next slide, please. The first way that they're doing it is they are really prioritizing fossil generation in their interconnection queue. Their interconnection queue, so the projects that are waiting to interconnect to the grid, is very congested. There have been a lot of delays with these studies, and it has been backed up and stopped for years and years and years. And part of the way that they want to meet this projected energy demand is by allowing projects to essentially jump the queue. And it's very clear through their guidelines and through the projects that they're choosing that they are prioritizing fossil generation. The first fast track interconnection process was last year, the Reliability Resource Initiative. 51 projects were chosen, making up 11.8 gigawatts to jump that queue, to jump the line to connect to the grid. And 69% of that capacity was gas. And this was specifically chosen by PJM to jump the queue. just as context, 96% of the interconnection queue is renewable. So that's solar, wind, and batteries. So they chose 69% of the gas capacity chosen to jump the 96% of renewables existing in the interconnection queue. Another fast track initiative is the expedited interconnection track. They're going to select 10 projects per year, I believe starting this year. And one of the eligibility requirements is that the project is over 250 megawatts. So this will clearly prioritize gas because they have typically, like a gas plant can have a higher capacity. And so, through this, it is shown that they are having that same favoritism towards gas in this process as well. Next slide, please. Another way they're prioritizing fossil fuels is delaying retirements of existing plants. Emergency orders from the Department of Energy have kept plants on nationwide this past year, fossil fuel plants that were slated to retire. They've allowed plants to run past their air quality permits, and they are really delaying that planned retirement. 60% of plants in PJM that were slated to retire in 2025 have been kept running. Typically, plants are slated to retire because they are expensive and polluting, and they are not worth the money to keep running. And so keeping these plants online will cost ratepayers a lot of money. And so in PJM, it's estimated to be costing ratepayers $730 million by 2029. Nationwide, it could be $3 to $6 billion is the cost of these emergency orders to keep plants running. Next slide, please. One example of this is Eddystone Generating. It was a formerly coal plant that was transitioned to gas and oil. It was set to retire last year, but an emergency order from the Department of Energy kept it running in May to August. Another emergency order in August kept it running to November. Another emergency order in November kept it running till now. And actually, just yesterday, another emergency order was issued to keep Eddystone Generating running until this May. And it is estimated to cost ratepayers $70 million annually to keep this plant running. Next slide, please. Another way that PJM is prioritizing fossil fuels is recommissioning plants that have already retired. Next slide, please. We'll hear about this more from Jay later in the presentation, but just to give a brief overview, Homer Generating Station was a coal-fired plant that retired in 2023, and it is being recommissioned as a natural gas plant. It's slated to be the most expensive plant. It's 4.5 gigawatts, 7 gas turbines, and the express purpose is to power data centers. Next slide, please. And one of the last ways that they are prioritizing fossil fuel expansion is allowing peaker plants to be converted into baseload plants. Peaker plants run very infrequently, typically because they are very expensive and polluting. They are some of the oldest gas plants, and they're being bought by external companies to be converted back into baseload power plants to meet this energy demand. Next slide, please. So within the context of Pennsylvania, looking at fossil fuel use, Pennsylvania has a history of these, fossil fuel generation, coal, and natural gas. And initially they did join the regional greenhouse gas initiative, which was a cap and trade market through a lot of the northeastern states. But last year, Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania decided to exit that climate policy. And additionally, we can see, because of the interconnection queue, because of various different prioritization of fossil fuels, Pennsylvania's renewable energy growth has really stalled, and it ranks 49th in the US for that renewable energy growth. Next slide, please. And as we're thinking about prioritization of fossil fuels, often the question comes to mind, like, what is the alternative to meet this energy growth if there does have to be this increase in energy demand? Which, Josephine will get into, whether or not the estimated demand is accurate. But as I mentioned before, solar, wind, and batteries make up 96% of the interconnection queue in PJM. That's these numbers were as of a few days ago: 73 gigawatts of solar, 10 gigawatts of onshore wind, 14 gigawatts of offshore wind, and 44 gigawatts of batteries. And just a reminder, that is the queue of projects waiting to connect to the grid that have been delayed, and the gas projects have jumped this renewable energy. And a study came out last year that found that this renewable energy could interconnect at surplus interconnection points, so points where potentially thermal gas power plants aren't outputting the amount of capacity that that interconnection point can have. And having these renewables use up that surplus interconnection could really help meet that projected energy demand. Next slide, please. And just before I pass it on to Josephine, I just want to give a brief overview of some numbers about what is the cost of this AI use, data centers, and fossil fuel expansion. It'll have a great monetary cost to ratepayers and to people, to ratepayers who are paying for this gas generation and for the transmission costs. Renewable projects are cheaper than fossil fuel plants. 91% of new renewable projects were cheaper in 2024, and yet PJM and Pennsylvania continue to prioritize fossil fuels. The transmission costs to connect these data centers to the grid are extremely expensive. PJM passed on $4.3 billion to ratepayers in 2024. And then also on the health and climate side, data center demand, if it goes in the same direction that it has been going, it will add 24 million to 44 million metric tons of CO2 to the atmosphere by the end of the decade. And that is not even to touch on the local air pollution problems that keeping these plants running and creating new gas-fired power plants will create. And with that, I will pass it on to Josephine.
Thanks so much, Ava. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to tell you more about data centers, and my specific focus is the energy affordability issue that Ava mentioned right at the end there. Next slide. So the first of a number of issues related to this, both the data center explosion lately and this massive interest in AI, as well as the infrastructure that comes along with it, is the issue of overestimation. Next slide. Data center developers have an incentive to submit multiple duplicate interconnection requests, and their demand is often depicted as less flexible and higher capacity than it really is. This graphic depicts the wide range of where data centers electricity use might become. You'll hear a lot of these estimates, and those are typically on the high end from the data center developers themselves and the tech oligarchs behind those projects. And more realistically, on the lower end of this wide span is more likely where this could be. For the past decade, data center usage of electricity has been relatively stable because even as data centers have increased, the efficiency has also increased. So the electricity usage hasn't gone up massively. The Homer City generating station is reported to be a cost of $2,222 per kilowatt hour, making it one of the most expensive power plants in the country. That is a facility that until last week was the largest proposed gas-fired power plant in the country. There is now a new one in Ohio that's even larger proposed. It's like Ava was mentioning, a coal-fired power plant that was decommissioned, and they're now trying to convert it into a gas-fired power plant exclusively to power AI hyperscale data center that they want to build out in Homer City. There's limited data available to accurately predict the demand from data centers, but overestimation is a low risk to utilities because they aren't harmed by a bunch of extra power available to them. The high risk is to ratepayers. And so all of these factors involved here on estimating the load growth are expected to influence residential energy bills and increase them by over 10% in PJM region in the near term. Next slide. So what is BRA? This stands for Base Residual Auction, and it is an annually held auction every 3 years in advance of the electricity delivery year by PJM to get commitments from their various energy suppliers. So all of their fossil fuel, all of their renewable suppliers, and they get a commitment to offer their capacity for a 1 year term, like I said, 3 years in advance. All of that to sort of say it's capitalist money arranging to estimate the cost of what you're going to need to buy as far as how much electricity for the grid to supply to consumers. Customers pay for the energy they consume, but they are also paying for the energy that needs to be available to serve their accounts. And the grid is based on their usage and demand during the peak hours when it's most constrained. This is, if you look at your electric bill, what you might see as a capacity cost, and that can be about 30%-ish of your supply charges in your bill. The last 3 BRAs, which again are held annually, have been skyrocketing in cost. So the 14.7 billion that you see was 3 years ago, 16.1 billion was 2 years ago, and last year it was 16.4 billion. It has been skyrocketing in cost compared to, again, a more stable energy estimation. While several factors can influence this, the main thing that we're seeing is data center load growth, which was found by an independent market monitor that monitors PJM. And they are now looking to demand that PJM stop connecting new large data centers. Next slide. Even with the record numbers of this increase, they don't have the capacity to actually meet the margin that is called reserve margin, which is when there's extreme weather events, you have a reserve in electricity, or just an extremely high peak capacity, you can receive blackouts if you are not available to meet that reserve margin. Oh, and like I said, PJM's monitor that found that data centers are probably one of the major causes of this, filed a complaint with FERC to demand that PJM stop connecting new data center loads because it doesn't have that reliable capacity. Next slide. So this is a recent electric bill. As you can see, it's from January and the half month December and January this past year. This was shared by a resident local to us in the northeast of Pennsylvania, and they're served by PPL Electric. Their electricity bill was $753. The supply side is that $500 that you see in the top left, and then the delivery fee is 227 or so on the right. If you look, PPL's utility price to compare is nearly 13 cents a kilowatt hour. What I wanted you to notice that's most interesting about this bill is the snippet in the bottom left. You can see the electricity usage by this person. So this person has electric heat, and they do have a high bit of electricity that they use in the winter to heat their homes. But they put in place various efficiencies and other things to try and reduce their usage, as you always get, and you'll see from PPL and from other utilities saying, oh, you need to save by sealing your windows, and you need to save by turning your temperature down and turning off lights, those kind of things, adjusting the temperature in your water heater. The person with this bill did a lot of those things, and they got their usage down 11% from 2025. So the 2026 electricity usage was down for the month of January 11%. The temperature indeed was also a couple of degrees warmer on average from the different years. But if you look at their average daily cost, it's 70%, 76% increase on their bill per day from 2025's January bill versus this 2026 January bill. So PPL is currently requesting an increase, the ability to increase their rates through the Public Utility Commission. And if folks are PPL customers, you can provide comments on hearings related to that. In the bottom right, I took a screenshot of a fairly callous article posted by PPL on January 14th. Winter bills straining your budget, we have resources to help. But when you click on it, it's very similarly advice on how to like not waste electricity, or if you make under a certain income, which is a very low number, you're in the poverty, under the poverty line, they can delay the bills or put you under budget billing. Next slide. On that article, there were 40 comments or so, 43 comments when I last took a look at it, and I pulled some screenshots. And almost all of these are help. I need to choose between electricity and groceries. This is outrageous. I paid $100 a month before, and now I'm paying $600 to $800 a month. My salary is no good for these pays. I don't think I can pay next month. I'm afraid of getting my heat turned off. This is higher. I've been living in the same house for 16 years. So I took a few of them off, and PPL is not like responding or helping those folks. They have been responding to some of the comments by saying, here's the way to track your energy usage with our handy dandy online energy tracker, but not responding to folks asking for support on their bills. Next page. One of the major issues with the data center situation is that you can pay for it now and pay for it later, because we are subsidizing data centers with our taxes, and then we're also paying for the infrastructure in our utility bills. Next page. There's currently no mechanism to ensure that utility costs incurred by one large load customer, like a data center, are directly allocated to that customer. And there are talks to try and make that happen, but typically the bills for building new infrastructure are socialized across all ratepayers. So you as an individual ratepayer will be paying a certain dollar amount for the infrastructure that needs to go in to build these data centers, as well as infrastructure that you need when you need some transmission upgrade down the street. But that amount is very outsized in favor of the data centers having you pay for their infrastructure. Back in 2021, there were data center tax breaks that were put in place, and they cost the state millions every year. What it is it's a break on data center exemptions for their equipment. So their computers and their servers, they don't have to pay tax on those in the state. The other issue is that fossil fuel projects are expensive, and the fossil fuel industry benefits from $760 billion annually in subsidies, tax breaks, unpriced externalities. And at this point, 91% of renewables are cheaper as far as renewable projects than the fossil fuel options that we have out there. So you're paying by giving tax breaks to fossil fuel companies. You're paying by your electric bill, paying for transmission upgrades and new power lines and infrastructure. And then you're also paying with the state tax breaks on data center equipment. Next page. You're also paying for it with your health. This is only one example of the myriad of different ways that data centers can impact your health, either with the fossil fuel infrastructure used to power them or with the direct impacts of their potentially contaminating your water or the noise and light pollution. But one of the major ways is that they have backup generators, but they've been using them in other places to just run 24/7 and choke out whole communities with the pollution from those gas and diesel turbines. And a backup turbine, a generator, is a semi-sized truck device that is considered mobile because you can move it around via a truck. Next page. A few ways that we can counteract that is voicing our concerns and monitoring your air. There are purple air monitors across the state that have been installed by Physicians for Social Responsibility. And we can get a baseline for your air quality now to figure out what's going to happen as we fight these various data center projects across the state. Potentially, just from this pollution, we could end up with 1,300 premature deaths from the condition by 2028. Next page. Some solutions to stopping the data center expansion beyond what it actually needs to be. And I will stress here that none of us here are the reason that the AI expansion is contributing to this data center and energy crisis. It's a made-up crisis because the AI quote unquote revolution is something being pushed upon us. Even if some folks out here use Amazon Web Services or ChatGPT, which are things that I, recommend avoiding, we, the consumer, are not the ones responsible for this massive artificial energy burden. We have regulatory and legislative solutions that can help with this. Next page. Some examples of that are early exit fees, schedules to ensure that we have enough infrastructure in place, tracking the utility costs, and specifically charging the data center customers for those utility infrastructure costs. And then, like I said, 91% of renewable energy projects are cheaper than fossil fuel alternatives. Also, in the state of Pennsylvania, Senator Katie Muth has recently proposed a 3-year statewide moratorium, and I encourage folks to call your senators and ask them to co-sign onto this, because that would give the state 3 years' time to put regulatory and legislative guardrails in place rather than these sort of predatory development projects just popping up and folks having to oppose it at the local level. Next slide. In the meantime, I'm a community organizer, and local solutions have been kicking it off and really creating a positive impact because the power is really in us. Next slide. A great example is the Project Hazelnut site that was proposed and still is proposed for the area just west and south of Hazleton. It was denied approval after we had major turnout with folks demanding that the application be denied by the supervisors. What we're seeing is that organizing at the grassroots level, connecting with other concerned residents, finding your local leaders or becoming a local leader where you get folks together to voice your concerns to your local municipality, your state legislators, and getting ordinances in place to safeguard it can really have a positive impact. Next slide. the data center resistance has been something like I've not seen in a long time as far as organizing. Folks have noticed that it's a bipartisan issue. People all across different ideologies and interests are opposed to these. Next slide. And we are being noticed by the industry themselves as $64 billion of data center projects have been delayed due to local opposition in the past year. Last slide. If you want to learn more about various ordinances that you can use to get involved with your local township or borough, you can learn more at psrpa.org/data center. And I'm sure that Jay, who's with Clean Air Council, will be able to talk a bit more about ways to resist this onslaught.
Hello. Hi. My name is Jating Walker. I am an organizer for Clean Air Council. We talked about some of the impacts and concerns of data centers. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what residents are doing about it. This is one specific case study that I work on. It's the Homer City Data Center campus. It is in Indiana County, in Homer City. It's 4.4 gigawatts of data centers on 3,200 acres. And the plan is for it to be powered by a newly built gas-fired power plant. The power plant could emit up to 910 tons of ammonia per year, and also 17.5 million tons of greenhouse gases. Next slide. So like was mentioned earlier, the Homer City power plant that's being built was slated to be the largest gas-fired power plant in the country, although I hear now that that might be contested. Um, it's a this data center project. One of the reasons it's being pushed is to help prop up the gas industry. So what was announced along with the power plant was a $15 billion gas purchase deal with EQT, the largest fracker in America. And it's the gas industry's latest in a long search to find ways to prop up the price of gas. So recently, the Shell cracker plant was built, which was a way to turn gas into plastic. And then also there's been a lot of investment into liquefied natural gas so that our gas could be exported to other countries. Every time data centers are being promoted, whether it's conferences or press conferences or industry conferences, they're talk about fossil fuels, and fossil fuels are definitely one of the major drivers of this push for more data centers. Next slide. So one of the issues that we are seeing in the Homer City example is with transparency. And I know that this is an issue that's true of a lot of data center projects. So one of the first red flags was a revolving door with government. One of the county commissioners of Indiana County resigned to join the Homer City redevelopment that's building this natural gas-fired power plant. So right there from the beginning, we know that this former elected official was having private meetings about this project before resigning to become part of the project. So we've seen that revolving door. We also know that a lot of decisions are happening in back rooms. When the project was publicly announced, it was already very much planned down the line. Meetings with government had already occurred, meetings with local power brokers, long before the public was included. We know that there were NDAs signed. Some public officials have admitted to signing non-disclosure agreements, which would make it illegal to disclose some of the details of the plans and some of the discussions. Another concern about the project is we are getting details about the gas-fired power plant, but there's very little detail about the data centers. every time the development company talks about the positives, it includes the positives of the data centers. But every time the development company is addressing concerns, they say they don't have information about the data center, and the same thing of the DEP as well. Without more information about the data center, it's hard for residents to get a full picture of the impacts of the entire project. It's like a piecemeal project where they're hoping to chop it up and then kind of get parts of it done at a time to reduce the overall scope of to reduce concerns. So speaking of that, for the data centers, we don't know exactly where the water is going to come from. There hasn't been any specific plans created yet. There's also been sketchy job numbers, both for the power plants and for the data centers. One way they've been kind of conflating job numbers is talking about direct and indirect jobs. Um, Indirect jobs are not jobs that are being brought by the power plant or the data center. They're kind of like jobs that already exist in the community, and the development company is arguing that the jobs being brought that are going to indirectly kind of grow other kinds of jobs in the community. But that's kind of it's very misleading, especially when we've seen newspapers report the direct and indirect job numbers as one total job number. We also are, it's unclear what the tax impacts will be. Um, we don't know if there's going to be a local tax break given. We do know that the state has a sales tax break, and that's commented upon in the report. Um, and we're not exactly sure what the tax impact will be for the school district and the local community. So the theme here is a lot of vagueness about the positives of the development, and also a lot of vagueness about the negatives of the development, where they're promoting potential positives, and while also kind of downplaying all the potential negative impacts. And what kind of sums this up is that there's nothing to hold either developers or the politicians that are pushing it legally accountable to their claims. If they don't meet the job numbers that they've claimed, there's no legal repercussions. So that's one of the issues that we try to make sure that residents keep in mind when they hear claims being made about what the impacts of the project are going to be. Next slide, please. I'm a community organizer. I began organizing in the Homer City and Indiana County community last year. It started out by educating residents about what was going on. A lot of people had heard maybe kind of like the top level line that there's going to be data centers coming to Homer City, but there was definitely a lot of confusion about that they're building a power plant and they're building data centers, and they're kind of separate projects but related. And we still see that to this day, a lot of conflating of the two projects. So we worked through a lot of existing networks to begin our initial education beyond what was announced in the press releases. We started out by working with a local UU church and also with student groups at IUP, Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Um, this involved me traveling to Indiana County and presenting in person to these groups multiple times to the same group. And more people were kind of learning some more of the details of the project. And they also got an opportunity to ask a lot of questions, which is really important. One of the big messages that I was really emphasizing early on and still to this day is that it's not a done deal, and it's not too late. The press releases and the local politicians, local leaders are trying to present this project as if it's already too late. Even when people ask questions, political leaders are saying, well, this is going to happen, so we're going to have to deal with it, right? And one of the messages that I was really trying to stress to people is that that's not true. We've seen gas-fired power plants be stopped even past at this stage, at the same stage. And I also talked a lot about how residents were having their power taken away and their voice taken away by being told that there is no opportunity for input anymore, that this was going to happen no matter what. So we're making it very clear that that is not the case. This project cannot happen if residents in the community do not want it to happen. Um, and part of that message was there were a lot of residents who were opposed to this, but they felt like they were alone, that no one else was opposed to it, and they felt like it was hopeless because of the amount of momentum that was being pushed by local business leaders and politicians and Homer City redevelopment. Next slide. So we began some early advocacy. The DEP hosted a hearing for the air quality plan approval, and through the work of the educational programs, we were able to find residents who really had a lot to say about the project. So one of my roles was to help those residents kind of plug into the regulatory system. The DEP set up an opportunity for residents to weigh in on the project and about the plans for construction. And my job was to help those residents get signed up to testify at the hearing, and also to like know what to say, or like to know a little bit more detail about the plans, because the plans are very technical. Another important role I had was just reminding people that the hearing was happening. It's very easy for these kinds of things to slip people's minds, and a lot of residents just didn't know about the hearing at all. So it was really important for us to spread the word. When we were in person at the hearing, this picture is from the hearing. It's from a newspaper article about the hearing. The vast majority of testifiers spoke in opposition to the project. And I think that really surprised a lot of residents. They felt like they were in like an extreme minority. And this was the coverage of this testimony. You can see the article here. This is from the Indiana Gazette. This was like the first negative coverage of the project at all. And this kind of further emboldened residents. Residents at this meeting were able to connect with each other, and find that they were not alone in opposing the project. We also we found that residents they were feeling alone. They were able to find each other in the audience, see who was speaking up. Next slide, please. Another important role for Cleaner Council was to have provide technical support for residents. Cleaner Council, along with other groups, appealed that air quality plan approval, and then they also provided technical comments for residents to submit at the DEP hearing for that approval. Our residents in Indiana County meet bi-weekly with Cleaner Council engineers and attorneys, and also other professionals from other nonprofit organizations. Residents have also been actively commenting in further DEP comment periods for the project, whether that's pipeline comment periods or more air quality comment periods. It's really, really hard for residents to hear about comment periods that are coming up. So one important role that the nonprofit community provides is to be tracking where those notices are put out, and to share them with residents to help them participate. Okay, next slide. So through this work, residents were able to connect with each other. They realized that they're not alone, and they formed a community group called Concerned Residents of Western Pennsylvania, otherwise known as CROW. They are a group that's explicitly opposed to both the gas-fired power plant and the data center. They have weekly in-person meetings, and they're focused on being a voice of opposition in the community to this project. Tasks that they've been taken on are educating their fellow residents, lobbying their local and county elected officials, and watchdogging the construction of the gas-fired power plant, and also the various meetings and permits that come through. Next slide. One thing that happened recently was that Concerned Residents of Western PA, CROW, hosted a really big event with residents. So CROW was kind of, I think they knew a lot of people personally that were opposed to the plant and that felt like they were alone. But before this town hall occurred, they were kind of unclear what the scale of opposition was. This town hall was a massive success. 200 people attended. There were panelists from various nonprofit groups that kind of informed about the project. And then there was a big question and answer session where residents were able to air their concerns. There was worry that there was going to be a lot of proponents of the project there, but it was a room full of people who were really concerned about what the project impacts on residents were going to be. And I think that getting people in a room together, again, made people feel like they are not alone. People are still feeling that way, that they're kind of alone in their concerns. And again, you can see some of the newspaper coverage here. There was a lot of coverage of this town hall, and again, the dominant narrative was that everybody in the community supported this project and everybody wanted to see it happen. All different stakeholders wanted to see it happen. And this made it clear that that was far from the truth. So the event was really important to host. And we're going to continue seeing more events like this too, and to bring those concerned residents into the Crow organization. Um, okay, that's kind of my summary of kind of some of the organizing that has gone into place around a data center project. This is the kind of organizing that's happening in communities around the country, and this is just the beginning of the organizing. I think one really important thing is that the data centers have not even been the proposals haven't even been made yet. They're still trying to get customers, yet there's some strong community organizing into play that's coming into play. And that's going to make it tougher for data centers to want to sign up for this data center campus. But also it's going to make it much easier to push the kind of like local regulations that Josephine talked about. So we're going to keep working, and hopefully we will be able to spread the word around much larger swaths of the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. We're gonna move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar now. So the first question is, why is Virginia getting so many data centers, and is there an incentive?
I can actually answer that one, or partially answer it anyway. One of the things is it's proximity to DC and the data cable that's massive and installed there. So it's an interconnection situation. It's worth it to the data centers to build where there's the least amount of additional infrastructure that needs to happen for their project. So that's part of it. But the also, once one developer and data center sort of got in there and got incentives going, folks moved away from that one because it's miserable to live next to one of these hyperscale data centers. And so the land just kept getting bought up and expanded and expanded. And I'm not from Virginia, so I don't want to speak for the folks there. There's still a lot of folks fighting, but it sort of was like a bowling ball coming in and knocking pins down here and there as they sort of just found a foothold that then allowed them to really start building. And there's still just a wild number of data centers being built. I think there's 600 currently proposed in Virginia.
Thank you. So the next question is, the national consensus is that data centers need to bring their own energy and capacity. Is there legislation proposed in Pennsylvania to require this? And is the PUC doing anything to ensure customers aren't paying through the nose for data centers?
I'm not sure if there's any legislation specifically for bring your own capacity, but I do know that there is a legislation, HB 1834, that we touch on a little bit in the report, that would go a bit of the way to protect ratepayers, including some of the things that Josephine mentioned, the early exit fees, the load ramping schedules. But yeah, if Josephine or Jay, if you have any more information on bring your own capacity specifically.
I can, add just a little bit. There has been talk about, like even from Governor Shapiro and others, about requiring on-site power generation, but the risk with that is what kind of power generation. What we really need to advocate for is safe power generation, clean power generation, because we're hearing people propose these small modular nuclear reactors, which would be extremely dangerous. And it's also like an untested technology that's looking to proliferate across the state. And then, like we've said in the various presentations, there's not a way to do an oil and gas like extraction and power generation that doesn't harm our health. There's not like a low emissions version of a gas-fired power plant. So that on-site is a risk or off-site is a risk.
I'll add that this kind of legislation would not help in the Homer City situation because they are building a gas-fired power plant to power the data centers. But also, just because they're building the energy doesn't mean there's not going to be costs that are passed on to ratepayers through PJM, through transmission upgrades, through various infrastructure upgrades. So it's kind of it's not a solution on its own in any way.
Yeah, and that, as the state is rolling back climate commitments, it would really need to be combined with air quality permits and things like that to make sure that the generation is, as Josephine mentioned, clean, because they do have some of their own power generation in the form of backup generators, but those backup generators are typically diesel. And, as was mentioned, some of them, are hoping to use those backup generators for more than just backup. And again, that is diesel, produces a lot of greenhouse gases and local air pollution and is extremely harmful.
Yeah, just a quick example. So in Archbald, Pennsylvania, up in Lackawanna County, there are in that community 60 proposed data center buildings, and with that, 1,000 of these proposed generators, these turbines. And I think most of them are diesel turbines, some might be gas powered turbines. But if there's a severe storm or a power outage and all of those kick on, 1,000 of those just in that community, think about the air quality impacts.
Okay, thank you all. The next question is, um, why are fossil fuel plants allowed to go past their planned retirement phases? Is it because we need all the electricity we can get, or is it a directive from the executive branch?
It's we have seen for the past year it's been an directive from the executive branch and following the administration goals of increasing fossil fuel use. Using Eddystone as an example, back in, I believe it was the August emergency order to keep it running, a lot of environmental advocates and environmental groups pushed back and used the example that Eddystone had only run for 1% in the past, 1% of the year in the past few years, and was not needed during the heat waves that the DOE was suggesting it was needed for. And in fact, during those heat waves, PJM was exporting energy to neighboring regional electricity markets. And so, Eddystone did not need to be running during that heat wave, even though that is what the DOE cited as the reason to keep it running. The DOE is using, as Josephine said, this fabricated emergency of energy in order to keep fossil fuel plants running. And they've said that they are just going to keep issuing these emergency orders to continue to burn fossil fuels.
Okay, thank you, Eva. Next question I think is more for Jay. What lessons or best practices do you see from previous similar experiences in Western Pennsylvania, such as fracking, in terms of organizing resistance to data centers?
Hmm. Okay, so my background has been more working on air quality work, like steel mill emissions, um, and resident impacts. And I'm working with facilities that have already been built. I think maybe the thing that kind of translate the most is kind of like the sense of defeat. Like I think all residents in both of those situations start with a sense of defeat. Um, like that the steel mills that I've been working with have been there for so long, they've been polluting for so long. No one's going to do anything about it. And then with this proposed project, like there's so much momentum that people feel like it's already over. So I think the most important thing is to make sure residents know that they're not alone and that the things they're dealing with, they're very serious, like this is seriously going to affect them and their neighbors, and to make sure that they know of examples where there have been victories, so that they kind of feel a little bit of hope, because losing hope is like the number one way resistance is kind of tamped down.
This is a winnable fight. I just want to echo what Jay said. And the something I'll add to as far as what have we learned with the site fights on fracking and other things, setbacks, or encourage your communities to put setbacks. These hyperscale data centers are humongous. You don't want to see like Salem Township with a 75-foot setback where they can be right up against a house, basically. We recommend, and this is from Food and Water Watch, they recommend 2,500-foot setbacks near residential areas and schools. So even if you don't have a data center proposed in your community, go to your township and borough and, have them put those setbacks in your zoning to help protect you for future projects.
And just to reiterate something Josephine mentioned earlier in the presentation is that PSRPA has done a lot of work on data center ordinances for towns, and that can really help towns on a town by town level be able to protect residents from these data centers and some of the harms that they can bring.
Okay, thank you. We are supposed to end at 2, but we'll go over a few extra minutes to address some more audience questions, if that's all right. Another question is there any local and regional policy being proposed to mitigate the energy demand with renewable energy and batteries?
I'll go first. We've seen a few uh, bills come in, Senate bills and House bills. I'm thinking of the issue before I mention which bills is that these ones are often like throw you a bone, but not meaningful requirements for renewables. So we're seeing Pennsylvania trying to force in their own ordinances, and by force in, I mean have the DRBC put in an ordinance on recommendations around data centers, but them being the ones who are uh, encouraging developers to come to the state and to bring these projects in and trying to get that put in the municipal planning code with 2151, which we don't want. And then requiring a measly 25% renewables. So there hasn't been meaningful legislation put forth for requiring everything from the renewables. And again, I want to stress when you demand renewables, you want to be explicit and say, wind and solar. You don't want nuclear coming in because we do have nuclear power plants, and 3 Mile Island is coming online after its meltdown back in, was it 79? And it's exclusively for Microsoft as a customer to power their AI.
I'll say in a similar vein, the developers at Homer City, in response to requests for renewable energy, they've kind of thrown residents a bone saying like we could have renewable energy somewhere on the site. Again, like no substance to it, but they will say that they have said that. And same thing with like they talk about like water cooling for data centers, but there are no data center proposals yet. So it's impossible to be able to like say you're going to do that. And again, there's going to be no accountability for anything the developer says, and that's something I keep reminding residents.
We hear developers, there was a hearing at Valley View High School in Lackawanna County last year where Amazon and others came to talk about the data center, you know, uh, onslaught in the Northeast. And Amazon said at least 3 times in their opening remarks, carbon free, carbon free, carbon free. But when you then look at their actual permit applications, that's not the case. And it's very polluting things that they're putting forth. So they're saying something um, to residents and doing something else when they're applying for these projects.
Thank you. I think I think that's about all the time that we have for questions. So thank you everyone for speaking today. Thank you to everyone who attended and asked questions. This webinar is going to be has been recorded and will be sent to all the attendees. So thanks you again, Jay, Josephine, and Ava, and I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.